For the second time in a year, the Japanese buyers have forced a price cut in Australia's coking coal. This time the reduction is as high as $3.60 Australian a tonne. According to the New South Wales Coal Association, this latest drop is softened by the lower exchange rate, but producers are still back to where they were a year ago.
The concern, of course, is what happens with the exchange rate from here on. That, if the exchange rate starts to move upwards and moves up fairly quickly, then there will be an impact on the industry. Right where it is at the moment, the impact isn't all that severe.
If the exchange rate does rise, Mr Hannon says some hunter operations could close.
Companies that have been marginal or having difficulty through 1992 would have hoped for something better than what we've got.
Primary Industry Minister Simon Crean, who was in the Hunter today, says there is little the government can do to influence coal prices.
If the demand pressures are down and there's oversupply, then a government stepping in is not going to be able to artificially raise the price.
The miners' union says it's concerned coal companies might use the price drop as an excuse to make further cuts to the conditions and numbers in the workforce. While not answering the union's fears directly, the Coal Association says the industry has already rationalised to be competitive and will have to continue to do so to stay in the race in an increasingly tight world market. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
It was sailing room only at Belmont Bay as competitors assembled for the championships. 232 boats will contest the national titles, including entrants from Sweden, England, Switzerland, Italy and New Zealand. After rigging up, it was time for a test run, and although the waters were calm, some were set for a tough ride. It may have been a practice race, but it was a taste of things to come. The competitors lining up for the championships are world class, including a return to the laser class by 3-time world champion and Olympian Glenn Burke. The local hopes will rest with Belmont's Scott Ellis, the 1990 champion, and Jacqueline Ellis, the 89 women's champ. Racing starts at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
For a month, Water Resources have been trying to find out why the river from Aberdeen to Singleton is off colour.
So they've been looking for people dumping in the river and all sorts of explanations.
Tests have shown it's a muddy substance called Molosera algae, a growth that's triggered by phosphates and nitrates in the river. It hasn't been previously detected in the Hunter. Experts say the water can still be used for agricultural and domestic use.
It's not toxic, so it's not the same sort of alert that we have with blue-green algae.
Water flushes from Glenbourne Dam to wash saline mine releases next week should also wash away the algae.
Newcastle's Roads and Traffic Authority building was at the centre of yesterday's bomb scare, which forced the evacuation of the surrounding area. The hoax bomb was in a plastic shopping bag just inside an entrance to the building. So elaborate was the hoax that an X-ray photograph of the device led police to believe the parcel could be explosive. With personnel taking cover, an army bomb disposal robot fired a shot into the device. However, the parcel didn't contain explosives.
It was an elaborate hoax down there yesterday. There were items inside that gave indications that it could well have been an explosive device, but it was, as I say, an elaborate hoax.
The scientific squad is examining the contents of the device.
With some of the modern methods of fingerprints, we're a little hopeful that we may find something on the wrappings or the contents.
Inspector Nielsen says if caught, the culprit would be charged under the Crimes Act. However, an attempt would also be made to recover the cost of the operation, which tied up valuable police, ambulance and fire brigade resources for most of yesterday. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Friday night's victory gave Newcastle the double header against Sydney CSC this season and also boosted the team's chances of gaining a spot in the NSL top 6. It was a sweet and sour game for stand-in skipper Darren Stewart. Stewart nailed home this sensational goal in the first half, but then injured his shoulder. Coach Bruce Stowell is confident Stewart will be cleared and continue to take the goal-scoring pressure off Warren Spink.
It's nice now that we can have Warren not necessarily being the only one to score, and Darren's goal was a perfect point.
Stowell is also pleased with the form of youngster Rod Brown, who's bounced back from a slow start to the season to be a regular in the top grade.
People were saying, oh, he's over there, he shouldn't have been bought and such like. Rod's still only in his late 20s, a lot of time in front of him and a good player.
The Breakers will start favourite against Preston on Friday, but Stowell says more improvement is needed.
We're not playing well enough to go in and be overconfident. It's nice to have moved up, it's nice to be just outside. There's a lot of work still to be done.
More than 100 competitors converged on the Old Bar roadside circuit for the Australia Day Challenge. This year's competition capped off the Taree Motorcycle Club's 50th anniversary celebrations. Motorcyclists from Sydney, Newcastle, Gunnedah and around the Mid-North Coast took part. The sidecar races were a popular event, the Central Coast father and son team of Ron Zacher and Ron Zacher Jr. winning both races. Mid-North Coast talent came to the fore in the Aces Invitation race, made up of the best riders of each class. Craig Gill from Macleay Motorcycle Club coming first. Meantime, on the Manning River, the powerboat engines roared in the Taree Aquatic Festival's Strait Course Classic. The biggest and fastest boats in the competition took part in a 2.5 kilometre dash. CRC Lattimore Lodge, driven by Bruce Ringer from Queensland, was first over the line. Brian McCosker from Bogabilla in the state's north in Liberty earned a second place, and Barry Chaplin from Sydney in Splitfire came third.
Shortly before midnight, in what was described as wet conditions, this Toyota Celica carrying 3 men had been travelling south along the F3 freeway just north of Joel's Bridge. Police say it appears the driver lost control of the car, which then collided with a rock wall on the eastern edge of the freeway. The impact caused the engine and front wheel assembly to be torn from the car. At the same time, it's believed the 3 men, all aged in their 30s and from Sydney, were thrown from the car. 1 died after hitting the rock wall. The remaining 2 were hurled onto the road where they were run over by other southbound vehicles. 1 was killed instantly. The other man was taken to the Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney, where he's fighting for his life. The highway was blocked for several hours while emergency crews cleared the wreckage. The Accident Investigation Squad from Hornsby is still assessing the incident. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The spectacular electrical storms which raged for more than 6 hours made their first and greatest impact on the Central Coast early in the evening. Seen from Gosford, the sky flickered with unleashed electrical energy, thousands of lightning bolts darting to earth. The Kulnura area took the brunt of the storm, strong winds snapping branches and uprooting trees. Heavy timbers crashed onto some properties and brought down power lines. Driving, wind and rain flattened crops in the area, and volunteer emergency personnel and electricity workers were set the task of restoring services and clearing roads littered with branches. It was a similar scene in the Lower Hunter. It's the second time in less than a week that the Maitland area has been hit by severe electrical storms. Trees were brought down from Balwarra to Rutherford. The worst damage in the area was to this garage on the New England Highway. The tree came crashing down during the height of the storm, destroying the fence, a barbecue and the garage. Damage is estimated at more than $10,000. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
About 30 Aborigines and their supporters paraded through the streets. While some Aboriginal activists may argue it was this day 205 years ago that the Indigenous people lost their culture and independence, the local Kooris were not protesting against Australia Day celebrations.
We do not support Australia Day, but we don't take anything away from Australians, our fellow colleagues who recognise Australia Day as a Australia Day celebration.
The march celebrated the United Nations Year of the Indigenous People, a move to let the wider community know Aboriginals are a part of the region and to build bridges between all Australians. Meanwhile, the Newcastle Greens Party has called for a treaty between blacks and whites to recognise the rights of Aboriginal people.
Speaking after the opening of the Torres Frail Age Hostel in Bingara, Austin Mack said the award took him by surprise.
A little bit stunned because I certainly didn't expect it. And I suppose you could safely say that if it belonged to anybody, it belongs to my family or local government.
He's taken an active role in local government in the northwest for almost 30 years. Mr Mack has served as a councillor and president of Bingara Shire and headed the New South Wales Shires Association for 4 years, representing the best part of a lifetime in local government.
My time's drawing to a close, I make no secret about it. I'm 57 now, and I always maintained when I started I wanted to be out of local government by the time I was 58, so it's fast approaching.
Since the championships began last Friday, poor wind conditions has enabled only one of 7 heats to be completed. Despite today's grey skies, the 10-knot winds answered race organisers' prayers, and they didn't hesitate in taking full advantage of the conditions. It was a clean start for the 165 Australian and international competitors, the biggest field ever at a national titles. Former Australian champ Scott Ellis in the yellow jacket put in some early work, as did New Zealand's Dean Barker wearing the blue cap. But it was Michael Hasbeck from Denmark who claimed the initial windward leg and, as seen here, cleared marker number 1 first, with Glenn Burke in the red jacket in hot pursuit. Then came Sweden's John Harrison in the dark blue dinghy and Sydney's John Faddy fourth. As the race progressed, these 4 pulled away from the rest of the field, Denmark's Hasbeck out in front till the second triangle, where 3-time world laser champ Glenn Burke snatched the lead. Burke went on to win the 9 nautical mile race, Hasbeck settling for second, with New Zealand's Jeff Senior coming in third. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Further down the coast at Torres, sausages were being sizzled at breakfast in Fotherington Park. Hundreds turned out for the All-Australian start to the day and were entertained with some old favourites. The traditional flag ceremony was carried out by the No. 17 City of Taree Air Training Corps. Mayor Ralph Metcalf officiated at the proceedings, in which Eric Richardson was named Citizen of the Year. In Port Macquarie, many took advantage of a family fun day at Flynn's Beach to get into the Australia Day spirit and soak up the rays. Gordon Toms has been recognised as the Citizen of the Year in the Hastings municipality. Amanda Harris is the area's Young Citizen, and Peter Ireland the Sportsperson of the Year. While in the Kempsey Shire, Victoria Everingham is Citizen of the Year, Jennifer O'Mullane Young Citizen, and the Sports Award has gone to Louise Clark. An arsonist's match may have tipped the delicate scale weighing the lighthouse's existence. Caretaker families had moved out some years ago, and a feeble beacon runs automatically. Hopes of restoring the burnt-out shell of the cottages were all but dashed when the National Trust decided to withhold fire insurance money. Since then, a group calling itself Friends of the Light have been lobbying support for the restoration. Another blow came when the federal government floated plans to relinquish control to the state. Fearing a state government sell-off, the Friends of the Lighthouse pressed Federal Environment Minister Ros Kelly during a recent tour of Port Stephens for a commitment to keep the light in the public trust.
And obviously it's an area that's pretty precious to Australia's future.
The hint of a lifeline for the beleaguered light came with the promise of a Heritage Commission investigation.
On the 31st of August last year, Sir Richard Hadley spoke to more than 100 people at the Iron Horse Inn at Cardiff. Andrew Hiskins was working at the pub at the time, and he well remembers the night.
It was a dinner, and then after the dinner he had a bit of a talk to everybody, told us everything about his career, his retirement.
The night in Cardiff was one of 3 organised by a 36-year-old Campbelltown man. Sir Richard also spoke at the Warners Bay Lodge in Wyong the following night and 2 days later at a venue in Campbelltown in Sydney. According to police, he was not paid for any of the speaking engagements. Sir Richard claims he's owed more than $3,000 in speaking fees. All 3 venues have been contacted by police.
Afterwards, we were informed that we were asked who we paid the money to, whether the people had actually got the money yet, and were told that Sir Richard Hadley hadn't received it yet.
Revesby Police in Sydney are handling the incident. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The gateway to Newcastle's regional airport has for years provided a bumpy and at times dangerous welcome to travellers. But that problem's about to be smoothed out. Land Transport Minister Bob Brown has pledged $3 million to build a 1.5 kilometre stretch of road around Williamtown and to upgrade the airport access route. The announcement comes in the wake of a $2.7 million upgrade for the airport itself. The airport's co-managers, Newcastle and Port Stephens councils, believe the new road will help the facility grow.
Now we'll be able to put the shop front on it. We'll be able to put the first-class road. It'll be well signposted, and people coming there will know exactly what they're doing, and it'll be advertising it itself.
Councillor Horn says the bypass will also improve safety on what's been a black spot.
Nelson Bay Road is a black spot road in New South Wales, and any money that is spent on Nelson Bay Road to improve it is very welcome.
Yet not everyone has welcomed the news. Graham and Rhonda Wright have just spent $40,000 on their bakery, and the new road means traffic and dollars will bypass their business.
I think it definitely will have to have some effect on the business. We do rely a lot on passing trade for probably maybe even 50% of our business.
Councillor Horn hopes work will begin on the project this winter when traffic volumes are down and will be ready in time for the tourist onslaught of the next Christmas holiday season. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
About 200 residents gathered to discuss the future use of the land in Grey Gum Road, Tuncurry. The Great Lakes Shire Council is in the process of buying about 5 hectares for use as an industrial estate.
Well, Council's position is at the moment that it's lodged its 10%. It's in the process of purchasing the block of land, and as such, as soon as it is purchased, hopefully go ahead with developing it into reasonably large-sized blocks of land.
Councillor Jones Cesar believes some residents are more concerned about the industrial use of the land rather than the koalas.
We commissioned an independent study from the Shortlands Wetlands Society, and their summing up was that this was a very poor koala habitat area.
Eric Hall, who organised the meeting, concedes there is concern about industry using the land. However, he says the Grey Gum Action Committee is primarily concerned with the koala's habitat.
Well, our main concerns is that this is the last remaining koala habitat in Tuncurry, and it's a very small corridor. It's about 200 metres wide, and it runs from Stewart Parade down to the back of the river here, and it's about 1 kilometre long.
The committee wants the council to prepare a fauna impact study. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Residents of the normally quiet Seam Street rushed from their houses to find a shattered Commodore sedan, its occupants 5 friends, 1 dead, the others still in the wreck. Police accident investigation officers are working on the theory that the speeding car lifted on a crest in the road, slewed sideways, cannoned into a parked car, then came to rest against a tree. 20-year-old Mark Tomlinson, a backseat passenger, was killed. Police are investigating whether the lap belt he was wearing contributed to his fatal injuries. The driver and front seat passenger escaped serious injury, but 2 other men in the back weren't so lucky. Once freed by rescuers, they were flown to the John Hunter Hospital and are undergoing treatment for spinal fractures. They're now listed as being in stable condition.
Since Pacific Power closed the gates of Newvale Colliery more than a month ago, the retrenched miners have been meeting with the organisation, trying to reach an agreement to lease the operation. Having proposed to put up their own money and work with a consultant, the miners were confident an agreement was in sight until after a meeting yesterday.
I'm devastated, and I'm sure that every other miner's devastated also.
What has disappointed the miners is Pacific Power expressing serious concerns about the commercial viability of the leasing proposal. The miners intended to pay $500,000 a year to Pacific Power to operate the colliery. The organisation has stated $2 million annually for 3 years would be needed.
With the conditions that Pacific Power has put on us, it won't get up running. That's insurmountable. $6 million is just, we'll put the price of our coal not on. We can't mine it for that price.
The miners say Pacific Power is placing every possible obstacle in the proposal's way.
Here we have got a perfectly viable coal mine and they won't let us work it. They're denying us the right to work.
A spokesman for Pacific Power says the organisation is not being obstructive, but merely trying to ensure the miners' proposal is commercially viable. The miners and their union have asked Premier John Fay for an urgent meeting to discuss the proposal.
Well, there's not a lot the union can do, but certainly from a political point of view, I'll be pursuing it through the Labor opposition to see if something could be achieved to ease that cost, to see if the operation could be at least get off the ground.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
These 20 or so men have been picketing the Singleton Army base for 8 weeks since the subcontractor who employed them went into liquidation. They believe the major contractor, Stewart Brothers, should pay the $200,000 they're owed in wages and entitlements, but the company has refused. This morning, Martin Ferguson met the men and gave his support.
Object. The principal contractors, such as Stewart Brothers, seeking government contracts, then employing subcontractors that are not capable of fulfilling their obligations. That's a real issue, especially on government jobs.
Mr Ferguson also believes the government has a responsibility. Current legislation means that when a company is liquidated, the tax office is paid first, the workers given what's left.
As far as I'm concerned, if Parliament sits again, a priority ought to be the legislation which makes sure workers get their entitlements when a company becomes insolvent.
The Singleton meeting was one of 4 on Mr Ferguson's agenda today. He was invited to the area by local member Eric Fitzgibbon to help bolster his re-election chances in the coming federal election. At Cessnock Workers Club, Mr Ferguson spoke with Labor members and miners from New Val Colliery. He promised to do what he can to help them save the mine from permanent closure.
Because we've got to try and keep every job we can get. Exactly. So we'll back in on that.
As part of his visit to the electorate, Mr Ferguson also met with residents and union officials of Beresfield and Curry. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
For the last 6 months, railway jobs have been secure with a government freeze on sackings. But the knives are back out. Transport Minister Baird announcing 2,000 jobs will go across the state this financial year. All will be voluntary redundancies.
Well, in this area we probably, let's say we're looking at anything from 100 to 200 possibly.
That's on top of about 600 jobs gone in the Hunter in the last 5 years. But what's really upset the union is a move on redeployments. Mick Schmitzer says some workers will be told to work in other regions or be out of a job.
If you don't go to that particular position, you don't take the voluntary redundancy, you will be deemed to have repudiated your terms of employment.
A spokesman for the Transport Minister says no one will be forced to leave State Rail, but the union says the government is overstepping the mark.
Certainly I can see big problems. Without going too far into it, there will be big problems.
What, you're talking some sort of industrial action?
Oh, certainly, most definitely there'll be big problems with it, yes.
While no date has been set for the next federal election, the Coalition is busy selling Fight Back Mark II. Senator Bishop addressed the Small Business Association in Newcastle today. She says there's a lot in the package for small businesses.
We're reducing $20 billion worth of taxes, abolished, because the plan of Fight Back is to abolish 7 taxes, lower income tax, raise pensions, and so that people will be better off.
The Coalition has also announced its strategy for women. Senator Bishop says the policy includes $90 million for childcare support.
We have put aside $90 million, which is going to be money that's going to be made available for additional help with regard to childcare expenses.
The details will be announced closer to the election. Senator Bishop added that under a coalition government, women who haven't been in the paid workforce would also have access to superannuation. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
It's a record field for the modified rods and an impressive lineup of drivers. Leading the charge will be Tony Hopping, who's had an incredible run at the Motordrome recently. But despite his successes, Hopping will have to break a hoodoo to win the state championships. Twice, mechanical problems have cost him the title. Pressuring hopping will be Lismore's Andrew Pizzuti, the defending champ, and Alan Harris, who had a tough time on his last visit. And if that's not enough, there's always the Motordrome solution to traffic jams, the Demolition Derby. Matthew White, NBN News.
Nine-year-old Peter Coleman spent a night in hospital, dazed and with 2 large fang marks in his foot. Yesterday afternoon he walked without shoes to a back shed at his Vasey home.
I was going up to the shed to get my bike, and I just put my foot out in front of the door and the snake lashed out and bit me on my foot.
The snake was identified as a brown, one of the most deadly in the country. Peter ran 50 metres to his house, where Mother Jan quickly put her first aid skills to work.
I immediately put him on the floor and got the only bandage I had in the house, and applied a pressure bandage. And my husband rang 000 and
Peter was rushed to hospital and treated with anti-venom. Experts say he was lucky.
I think that he may well have gotten into serious trouble if we hadn't had anti-venom available. The brown snake certainly kills people, and the smaller and the younger you are, the more likely you are to die from a bite.
Peter's mother did the right thing after the bite. Doctors advised the wound should be bound on and just below the fang marks and then wrapped up the arm or leg. The patient should be immobilised. The wound should not be washed. The hospital can identify the type of snake from venom at the bite. Peter Ryan, NBN News.